So here's a question. Are Squier guitars just cheap copies only for beginners, or are they now getting so good that even advanced players could be using them? In front of me here I've got my two Squier Telecasters. To the untrained eye, they probably look exactly the same. However, the one here on the left is much older. It's from around 1997 and it was made in Korea. The one over here on the right is a much more recent, made in China, Classic Vibe model. What I'm going to do in this video is compare these two guitars side by side and try and answer the question, are Squier guitars getting better? Now, some may say, this is a Classic Vibe, that's one of Squier's top guitars. Of course it's going to be better, but a point I want to make right up front is, brand new, both of these guitars cost the same amount, both around £250, even though they were bought over 20 years apart. So this Korean model on the left, I got from a friend of mine whose mum had bought it for him in a mail order catalogue, the sort of thing where you sent off to buy clothes back in the 90s before the internet. But that's where you might have had to go to get a guitar like this. Whereas I bought the Classic Vibe from Bax in the Netherlands. I think now they're about $329, but I got a bit of a deal, got it for $250, and I think that shows with internet shopping now and being able to order from anywhere in the world, the opportunity to get low price guitars of good quality is much better now than it was back in the 90s. Now, before I start digging into some of the individual elements on these two guitars, I just want to give a really quick history about Squier. So Fender started making Squier guitars in the 80s. The original production was in Japan, and those guitars were vintage reissue style guitars. They had a really good reputation. A lot of players felt they were as good as, if not better, than what was coming out of the Fender US factory at that time. And if you can find one now, they're worth quite a bit of money. Into the 90s, production got moved to Korea and Indonesia and China, and Squier were then making much more budget-conscious, beginner-type guitars. And I think it's from that where they've got this reputation of being a bit rubbish. So as we look through some of the elements on these, what I want to draw out is how now you're starting to see again some features on this Classic Vibe that you just would not have seen on an old-style 90s, noughties Squier guitar. I'll walk through some of the components on these guitars now and compare them side by side. Then if you stay to the end, I'll give you my thoughts and opinions about owning these guitars and whether Squiers are really getting better and whether they're good enough that anyone could own one. So let's start by looking at the bodies. So on this 90s Korean model, you know what, I don't even know what the body is made of. My guess would be poplar, but I'm not sure. All I can say is in terms of acoustic resonance and sustain, it's fine, I've got no issues with it. In terms of the finish, I think this guitar was once white, it's gone quite yellow over time, which I actually quite like. It's also got really battered over time. I also quite like that. It's acquired some cracks around the neck pocket. You know, that's maybe not great, but it doesn't affect the playability at all. Onto the Classic Vibe. Now this has a pine body. Now pine is something that Fender used on some of the original 50s guitars, so it does have a history there. It mimics the look of ash really well, I think, and you can see the grain through this blonde finish. Personally, I think that looks fantastic and is a definite upgrade. One thing I would say though is the pine guitar is actually a little bit heavier than the original 90s guitar. So now looking at the bridge, what you'll see is the Korean guitar has a 6-saddle top-loading style bridge. What that means is instead of the strings coming up through the body, they just anchor in at the back here. That's done for cost-saving reasons, and I know a lot of people won't like it. Personally, I think, you know, Les Pauls have a top-loading type of bridge, and nobody complains about resonance or sustain there, so it's fine with me. The thing I would say is these saddles are really not great. The high E in particular likes to sink itself down of its own accord, and I have to keep bringing it back up, so not the best quality. On the Classic Vibe, what we get is strings through the back of the body into a ashtray vintage style bridge. This time we get 3 brass saddles. Now for me, the brass helps in terms of increased definition and spike in the sound, you know, that classic telly sound, it adds to that. What some people might not like is only having 3 saddles means you can't intonate each string individually. What I found though is, for me, the guitar plays perfectly in tune, no issues at all. Overall, the bridge is a huge upgrade on this Classic Vibe guitar. Regarding the pickups, I don't actually know anything about these ones on the Korean, except for the fact they're not really very good. So the neck pickup, for me, it's too muddy to be useful. The bridge pickup can be okay, but they're both underpowered, they're both uninspiring, they're probably the worst pickups I've ever had on any guitar, and they're probably a big reason why people think of these old Squier guitars as a bit rubbish. On the Classic Vibe though, you get Arnico 3 sort of vintage voiced low powered pickups. What I say is the bridge pickup works really well. It gives you a classic telly kind of sound. It's fatter than a Strat, not as harsh sounding, exactly what I wanted. The neck pickup, it's just okay. That's true of a lot of tellies, even in the higher price point. It's hard to find one with a really great neck pickup. So overall summary, decent pickups in the Classic Vibe. In the Korean model, pretty terrible. I'll give a very quick comment on the electronics, which is that I think it's a bit of a weak spot on both these guitars. I think you can feel that these controls, they're not quite as high quality as on upper end models, but if that really bothers you, it's probably the easiest thing on the guitar to upgrade. The other thing is this nut inside the jack socket, on both of them, it likes to come loose, and that's a bit of a pain because it's hard to get in there and tighten it up. But that's, I think, a generic problem that a lot of telly owners experience, and maybe won't just blame Squier for that. Turning to the neck, this is where I think a really big difference opens up between these two guitars. So as a player, the neck's the part you're most in contact with, the part in my view that most defines your experience of a guitar. On the Korean model, we've got a very unfinished neck. If there's any finish, then it's just a very light kind of oiling. On the Classic Vibe guitar, we've got a thick gloss tinted finish. Now, a lot of people will say they don't like those thick glossy finishes and like to sand them back. For me, I don't really have an issue with it being sticky or anything like that. All I can really say about these two guitars is that the Classic Vibe just feels so much nicer to play. In terms of fretwork, both guitars, no issues for me. No sharp frets, no high frets. Both guitars, no issue with the nut. But overall playing experience, 100% got to be the Classic Vibe. Very quick comment on the tuners. So on the Korean model, we've got the more modern hole through the post style tuners. They're not great, they don't work particularly well. The guitar doesn't stay in tune that well. You'll see on the E string, the top E, I've had to replace part of the tuner because it fell out. So overall, not great. Classic Vibe, by contrast, I really like these tuners. I've got no problems with tuning stability, and best of all, they're the ones where you stick the string down the hole and then twist it round, so you don't get that thing where your sharp string ends are all sticking out everywhere. So for me, big plus, big upgrade. So having compared these two side by side, what are my thoughts and conclusions? Well, I'm a bit biased because I'm quite attached to this old Korean Telecaster. I first got it when I was 16. I've played gigs on it, I've recorded with it, I've lent it to friends who've learned to play on it. It's been dragged about, bashed about, done loads of miles, loads of years of service, and it just keeps going. But quite honestly, it's really not very good. The Classic Vibe I bought because I wanted something which was like my old Telecaster, but better, and that's exactly what I got. So to answer the question, are Squiers getting better? Absolutely. The next question though, are Squiers at a level yet where advanced, more serious players should consider getting one? Again, my view is absolutely. So I often play the Classic Vibe alongside a Gibson Les Paul. When I'm switching between the two, I really don't notice that one's a much more inferior guitar in terms of price point than the other. I think the Classic Vibe has been all around the world with me. It's been, in freezing cold plane holds. It's been out into tropical climates of Malaysia, etc. Been all around China, and it just keeps going, no problems. The neck doesn't move. Really good guitar. And when it's the only guitar I've had to hand at times when I've been travelling, I've been really pleased to have it and never longed to get back to a Gibson or anything like that. So I absolutely recommend it. If you're the type of player who's maybe already got expensive guitars, maybe say you've got a Strat and you want to try a Telly, but you don't want to spend 1,500 quid on it, then Classic Vibe, absolutely brilliant option and thoroughly recommended from me. So thanks for watching the video. Well done if you made it this far through all my rambling. Leave a comment below if you got anything to add of your own experiences. Thanks.